The explosions lit up the darkness of space like deadly fireworks. Admiral Kethver watched from the bridge of his massive warship as human vessels scattered in every direction. Smoke and debris filled the void where the new Geneva colony had stood just hours before. The Zephyrian commander allowed himself a satisfied smile as he observed what looked like complete chaos among the human forces. Captain Jake Morrison gripped the armrests of his command chair as another fake explosion rocked his ship. The Defiant shuddered convincingly while his crew performed the most important act of their lives. Sparks flew from carefully rigged control panels and emergency lights bathed the bridge in red. To any watching aliens, it looked like his ship was barely holding together. "Captain, we're receiving multiple distress calls from the human fleet," reported Lisa Harper from her communications station. Her voice carried just the right amount of panic and desperation. She had practiced this performance for months, knowing that alien listening devices would pick up every word. "The Yorktown is reporting critical hull breaches. The Phoenix says their engines are failing." Morrison nodded grimly, playing his part perfectly. "Signal all ships to retreat to the outer colonies. We cannot hold this position." He turned to his tactical officer. "Ben, how many ships did we lose?" Ben Casey checked his displays with practiced efficiency. The numbers he read were all fabricated, but they needed to sound real. 17 vessels destroyed, sir. 23 more reporting severe damage. The aliens hit us harder than we expected. From his position high above the battle, Admiral Kethver intercepted these transmissions with growing satisfaction. The humans were broken, scattered, and running like frightened animals. His intelligence reports had been correct about their military capabilities. These creatures simply could not match Zephyrian technology and tactics. The conquest would be easier than his commanders had predicted. What the alien admiral could not see were the subtle hand signals passing between human crew members. What he could not hear were the secondary encrypted channels carrying very different messages. And what he definitely could not imagine was that every seemingly panicked retreat had been planned down to the smallest detail months in advance. The mastermind behind this elaborate deception sat in a hidden bunker deep beneath the ruins of Chicago. General Patricia Wells studied multiple holographic displays showing the positions of every human ship in the sector. Her gray hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her steel blue eyes missed nothing as she watched her carefully orchestrated plan unfold. "Phase 1 is proceeding perfectly," reported her aide, Colonel Frank Davis. "All ship commanders are maintaining their assigned positions. The aliens are taking our bait completely." Wells allowed herself a small smile. 6 months of preparation had led to this moment. Every human captain had been briefed on their role in the greatest military deception in the history of warfare. They had to make their defeat look real while secretly moving their forces into position for the real war that was about to begin. The plan had started with intelligence gathered by Dr. Alan Price, a quiet man who spent his days breaking alien communication codes. 3 months ago, he had cracked the Zephyrian military encryption and discovered their invasion plans. Instead of rushing to defend their colonies, Wells had made the hardest decision of her career. She would let the aliens attack, but she would control exactly what they saw and believed. New Geneva colony had been evacuated weeks before the attack, though only a few hundred people knew this secret. The explosions the aliens saw were carefully placed charges designed to create maximum visual impact with minimal actual damage. The civilians who appeared to be fleeing in terror were actually volunteers who had rehearsed their roles dozens of times. Captain Morrison received a coded message on his personal communicator. The text looked like routine damage reports, but the hidden meaning was clear. "Begin Phase 2 withdrawal. Maintain damaged ship appearance. Rendezvous at coordinates as planned." He passed the message to his crew using the hand signals they had memorized. "Lisa, send word to all remaining ships." "We're falling back to the Centauri system," Morrison announced loudly enough for alien listening devices to hear. "Tell them to abandon any vessels that can't make the jump. We'll pick up survivors later if we can." What the aliens observed next appeared to confirm their total victory. Human ships began powering down their weapons and shields. Several vessels appeared to be completely disabled, drifting helplessly in space. Others moved away slowly, trailing fake debris and venting atmosphere through carefully controlled releases. Admiral Kethver ordered his ships to pursue the retreating humans, but not too aggressively. His orders were to drive them away from their core worlds, not to destroy them completely. The Zephyrian High Command wanted human colonies intact for occupation. They needed the resources and infrastructure these worlds provided. "Sir, the human fleet is breaking up," reported his tactical officer. "Multiple ships are heading in different directions. They appear to be completely disorganized." The alien admiral studied the tactical display with satisfaction. The human ships were scattering, exactly as his psychologists had predicted. When faced with overwhelming force, humans would panic and flee without coordination. Their emotional nature made them predictable and easy to manipulate, but the truth was far different. Every human ship was following a precisely planned route to predetermined destinations. Captain Morrison's tactical officer Ben Casey had spent months calculating jump coordinates and timing sequences. The apparent chaos was actually the most carefully orchestrated. Military movement in human history. Commander Retta Stone commanded a group of what appeared to be refugee vessels fleeing toward the outer rim. Her ships looked damaged and desperate, but they carried some of humanity's most important cargo. Hidden in their holds were weapons, supplies, and key personnel needed for the next phase of the war. "Commander, we're being followed by 3 Zephyrian scouts," reported her navigator, Tom Wilson. Stone nodded calmly. "Perfect. Let them see exactly what they expect to see. Are the fake refugee transmissions ready?" "Yes, ma'am. We're broadcasting distress calls, casualty reports, and requests for sanctuary in the outer colonies. The aliens are recording everything." This was exactly what General Wells had planned. The Zephyrians would follow these refugee ships too, discover what they believed were hidden human settlements. Instead, they would find abandoned mining stations and empty research facilities. Meanwhile, the real human forces would be moving to locations the aliens could never imagine. Dr. Alan Price had done more than crack alien codes. His analysis of Zephyrian psychology and military doctrine had revealed crucial weaknesses in their thinking. They were arrogant, methodical, and completely convinced of their own superiority. They would see what they expected to see and ignore evidence that contradicted their assumptions. The retreat continued for hours, with human ships spreading across dozens of star systems. To watching aliens, it looked like the complete collapse of human military organization. Distress signals filled the communication channels. Ships reported critical damage and dwindling supplies. Civilian vessels begged for protection that military forces seemed unable to provide. Admiral Kethver finally ordered his fleet to halt their pursuit. The humans were beaten and scattered. His ships could begin the systematic occupation of human worlds without fear of organized resistance. The war was over before it had truly begun. As the alien fleet moved toward the inner colonies, Captain Morrison allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Phase 1 was complete. The Zephyrians believed they had won a crushing victory. They had no idea that humanity's real war machine was just beginning to wake up. 3 months had passed since the Zephyrian forces occupied human worlds across the galaxy. Admiral Kethver reviewed reports from his occupation commanders with growing satisfaction. The humans had simply vanished from the surface of their own planets. No organized resistance, no sabotage attempts, no desperate attacks on alien installations. It seemed the broken human spirit had finally accepted defeat. What the alien commander did not know was that beneath his feet, an entire civilization was being born in darkness. Captain Steve Murphy had traded his space uniform for mining equipment and hard hat. His hands were covered in dirt and his back ached from weeks of digging, but he smiled as he watched another section of tunnel connect with the main network. The sound of drilling echoed through passages that now stretched for hundreds of miles. Beneath the major human cities. Murphy wiped sweat from his forehead and checked his progress charts. The underground network on Terra Prime was nearly complete. Similar projects were happening on 47 other occupied worlds, all following the same master plan designed by General Wells months before the invasion. What looked like random mining accidents and construction work to the aliens above was actually the creation of the largest hidden infrastructure project in human history. "Captain, we've reached the hydroponics facility," reported Engineer Sally Brooks as she emerged from a freshly cut passage. Her clothes were dirty, but her eyes sparkled with excitement. "The food production systems are online and working perfectly. We can feed 10,000 people down here if needed." The underground cities were marvels of human engineering compressed into impossible spaces. Dr. Koren Phillips had spent years studying how to create livable environments in confined areas. Her designs included air recycling systems, water purification, plants, and even small manufacturing facilities. Everything needed to sustain human life was being built in caverns the aliens would never think to explore. Phillips stood in what would become the main medical center for the underground complex. Beneath New York, she had been working with biochemist Dr. Roy Adams on projects that went far beyond simple survival. Their laboratory was hidden behind what looked like a natural cave formation, but inside they had equipment that would make university researchers jealous. "Roy, have you finished the analysis of the Zephyrian tissue samples?" Phillips asked as she adjusted her microscope settings. Adams looked up from his workstation with a grin that would have worried any alien who saw it. "Better than finished, Koren. I've identified 17 different vulnerabilities in their biology. Their nervous system is particularly sensitive to certain electromagnetic frequencies, and their breathing apparatus has a design flaw that we can exploit." The tissue samples had come from medical examinations the aliens required all humans to undergo. What the Zephyrians thought were routine health checks were actually intelligence-gathering operations. Every scan, every blood test, every physical examination provided human scientists with data about their occupiers. The aliens were studying humans, but humans were studying them right back. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Johnson coordinated resistance activities from a command center that had been carved out of solid rock beneath the ruins of Washington, D.C. Her communications equipment looked primitive compared to military hardware, but it was completely invisible to alien detection systems. She could talk to resistance cells on planets hundreds of light years away without the Zephyrians having any idea the conversations were happening. "Sergeant Turner, what's the status of training programs in your sector?" Johnson asked into her encrypted communicator. Nick Turner's voice came through clearly despite the distance. "All civilian groups are progressing ahead of schedule, Colonel. We've got farmers who can now handle military equipment and shopkeepers who understand tactical planning. The aliens think we're just trying to survive, but we're actually building an army." The beauty of the resistance training was its simplicity. Humans gathered in small groups supposedly for emotional support and resource sharing. The aliens encouraged these meetings, thinking they helped maintain order among the defeated population. What actually happened in these gatherings was intensive. Military education disguised as community building. Helen Brooks had become an expert at maintaining communications between resistance cells. Her background in computer programming had prepared her for the challenge of creating networks the aliens could not detect. She used everything from modified household appliances to hidden transmitters built into seemingly broken equipment. "The network is running perfectly," she reported to Johnson during their daily check-in. "All 57 cells are connected and coordinating their activities. The aliens have no idea we're talking to each other." The communication system relied on frequencies and encoding methods that Zephyrian technology simply could not recognize. Dr. Alan Price had designed the encryption based on mathematical concepts that alien minds apparently could not grasp. Human messages looked like random static to alien listening devices. Paul Roberts had perhaps the most dangerous job in the Resistance. As a maintenance engineer, he had access to Zephyrian facilities throughout the occupied zone. His official duties involved keeping human infrastructure running for the benefit of the occupation forces. His real mission was mapping every alien installation and identifying weaknesses that could be exploited later. Roberts crawled through ventilation systems and maintenance tunnels, placing tiny surveillance devices where aliens would never think to look. Each device was smaller than a coin and powered by ambient energy, making them virtually impossible to detect. Within weeks, human intelligence knew more about Zephyrian operations than the aliens knew themselves. "I've got complete blueprints of their command center," Roberts whispered into his hidden communicator. "Security routines, shift changes, equipment specifications, everything. When the time comes, we'll know exactly how to shut them down." Dr. Nancy Green worked in what appeared to be a refugee assistance center, helping displaced humans adapt to life under occupation. The aliens considered her work harmless and even beneficial for maintaining order. They had no idea that Green was one of the galaxy's most talented linguists, and every conversation with Zephyrian personnel was providing her with insights into their language and culture. Their communication patterns reveal significant information about their military hierarchy, Green explained to Johnson during a secret meeting. "I can predict their troop movements based on changes in their radio chatter. They're more predictable than they realize." The aliens had installed monitoring systems throughout human cities, believing these would help them maintain control over the defeated population. What they created instead was an intelligence network that worked in favor of the resistance. Human technicians who maintained the surveillance equipment made subtle modifications that gave resistance leaders access to alien communications while blocking their ability to monitor human activities. Underground factories hummed with activity as human workers produced equipment for the coming war. The aliens thought these facilities were making basic supplies for surviving civilians. In reality, they were manufacturing weapons, armor, and electronic warfare devices based on stolen alien technology. Every piece of Zephyrian equipment that broke down was carefully studied and reverse-engineered. Carl Davis supervised the most ambitious project of all. In abandoned mine shafts and forgotten subway tunnels, human engineers were building spacecraft designed specifically to fight Zephyrian vessels. These ships used hybrid technology that combined human engineering with alien innovations. They would be faster, more maneuverable, and deadlier than anything the galaxy had ever seen. The psychological impact of the underground network was as important as its practical benefits. Humans who had seemed broken and defeated were discovering that their species was far from finished. Every successful mission, every completed tunnel, every hidden facility proved that humanity could adapt and survive in ways their enemies never imagined. General Wells monitored all of these activities from her hidden command center. Her screens showed the progress of construction projects, training programs, and intelligence-gathering operations across dozens of worlds. The aliens believed they had conquered humanity, but humanity was using that belief to build something stronger than anything that had existed before. Phase 2 of the Great Deception was nearly complete. The Zephyrians had grown comfortable in their role as occupiers, confident that humans posed no threat to their control. They had no idea that beneath their feet in the darkness they never bothered to explore, their greatest nightmare was taking shape. 6 months into the occupation, strange reports began reaching Admiral Kethver's headquarters. His intelligence officers described massive energy readings detected in empty star systems, but every scout ship sent to investigate these locations found nothing but asteroids and cosmic dust. The alien commander dismissed these reports as sensor glitches or natural phenomena. He had more important matters to focus on, like managing the peaceful occupation of human worlds. What the Admiral's scouts had missed were the most sophisticated cloaking systems ever developed by human engineers. Hidden in the asteroid belts of uninhabited systems, massive construction projects were taking shape. Master Engineer Carl Davis stood on the observation deck of Shipyard Alpha, watching as the latest prototype vessel took its final form. The ship was unlike anything in the human fleet before the war, designed from the ground up to hunt and destroy Zephyrian vessels. "How many more weeks until she's ready for testing?" Davis asked his project supervisor, Linda Martinez. Martinez checked her tablet and smiled. 2 weeks for final assembly, then another week for system integration. The Retribution will be ready for Captain Mitchell's trials by month's end. Captain Tony Mitchell had been handpicked to command the first ship of humanity's new fleet. His background included years of studying Zephyrian tactics and technology, preparing him for battles that most humans could never imagine. He walked through the ship's corridors, inspecting systems that represented the best of human innovation combined with captured alien technology. The weapon systems were Dr. Phillips' masterpiece. Her months of studying Zephyrian biology and technology had produced plasma cannons that could burn through alien armor like paper. The defensive systems used electromagnetic fields that would disrupt Zephyrian sensors and communication equipment. Most importantly, the ship carried countermeasures that could disable alien neural networks, effectively blinding enemy vessels during combat. Captain, the weapons array is showing perfect integration with the targeting systems, reported his weapons officer Don Cooper. Dr. Phillips' modifications have exceeded all expectations. When we engage the enemy, they won't know what hit them. Mitchell nodded with satisfaction. The Retribution was just the first of dozens of vessels under construction in hidden shipyards throughout the galaxy. Each ship was built to specifications that would have been impossible before the war. Human engineers had learned to think in ways that alien minds could not anticipate. General Wells stood in her command center beneath Chicago, surrounded by holographic displays showing the positions of every human asset in the galaxy. Her staff had grown from a handful of officers to a full military organization coordinating operations across 50 star systems. The scale of her hidden war machine would have shocked the aliens who believed they had crushed human resistance. General, Operation Rising Phoenix is ready to proceed, announced her Chief of Staff, Colonel Rachel Kim. All units are in position and awaiting your signal. The plan that Wells had conceived months earlier was now ready for execution. Every human cell, every resistance group, every hidden facility would coordinate their actions in the largest military operation in human history. The attack would begin simultaneously on 200 Zephyrian installations across 50 worlds, supported by the emergence of the new human fleet. Communications flowed through the hidden networks that Helen Brooks had built. Her encrypted channels carried final orders to resistance leaders who had been preparing for this moment since the occupation began. The aliens had no idea that their defeated enemies were about to strike back with force. They had never imagined possible. Captain Jake Morrison received his final briefing aboard the Defiant, which had spent months disguised as a damaged refugee transport. His crew had performed their roles perfectly, convincing the aliens that their ship was barely functional. Engineer Lisa Murphy had used this time to upgrade every system while maintaining the external appearance of a crippled vessel. Lisa R. All the modifications complete? Morrison asked his chief engineer. Murphy grinned as she handed him a tablet showing the ship's true capabilities. Captain, the Defiant is now one of the most advanced vessels in the human fleet. Our weapons can penetrate Zephyrian shields. Our engines can outrun their fastest interceptors, and our defensive systems can withstand anything they can throw at us. The irony was perfect. The ships that aliens dismissed as worthless refugees were actually the most dangerous predators humanity had ever created. Morrison's vessel would lead the attack on Admiral Kethver's command fleet, supported by 30 other ships that had been presumed destroyed or fled in panic. Dr. Roy Adams put the finishing touches on his biological warfare project. The compounds he had developed would not harm Zephyrian personnel, but they would cause massive failures in their life support and computer systems. These agents had been secretly introduced into alien facilities months earlier, waiting for the signal to activate. Karen, the deployment systems are ready, Adams reported to Dr. Phillips. When we trigger the release, every major Zephyrian installation will experience simultaneous equipment failures. They'll be fighting blind and breathing recycled air. The psychological impact would be as devastating as the physical effects. Aliens who had grown comfortable in their role as occupiers would suddenly find themselves vulnerable and confused. Their technology would fail them at the worst possible moment, just as human forces emerged from hiding to attack. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Johnson coordinated the final preparations for the ground assault. Her resistance cells had been training for months, turning ordinary civilians into skilled fighters. Sergeant Nick Turner had done the impossible, creating an army from farmers, shopkeepers, and office workers who had never held weapons before the invasion. "All ground units are reporting ready status," Johnson announced during the final briefing. "We have detailed intelligence on every target, thanks to Paul Roberts' reconnaissance work. The aliens won't know what hit them. The intelligence advantage was overwhelming. Human forces knew the location of every Zephyrian installation, the schedule of every patrol, the weakness of every defensive system." Paul Roberts had spent months mapping alien facilities while pretending to be a maintenance worker. His surveillance devices had recorded everything the Resistance needed to know. Dr. Nancy Green had decoded the alien communication protocols that would allow human forces to monitor Zephyrian responses in real time. Her linguistic work had revealed that the aliens used predictable patterns in their military communications. Human commanders would know about enemy troop movements before the troops themselves received their orders. The hidden fleet began moving toward their target positions. Captain Mitchell's Retribution led a squadron of vessels that had been built in secret shipyards throughout the galaxy. Each ship carried weapons and defensive systems designed specifically to counter Zephyrian technology. The aliens had no idea that human engineering had advanced so far during the occupation. Admiral Kethver reviewed routine reports from his occupation forces, noting with satisfaction that human resistance had completely disappeared. His commanders reported no incidents, no sabotage attempts, no signs of organized opposition. The conquest was proceeding exactly as planned, with minimal effort required to maintain control. The alien admiral had no way of knowing that his peaceful occupation was about to become the most devastating military defeat in Zephyrian history. The humans he believed were broken and scattered were actually more united, more determined, and more dangerous than they had ever been before. General Wells looked at the countdown clock on her command center wall. In less than 24 hours, humanity would reveal the true scope of their capabilities. The species that was supposed to be shattered would instead demonstrate that they had used their apparent defeat to become something far more powerful than anyone had imagined. The storm was about to break, and the galaxy would never be the same. The attack began at exactly 8 o'clock in the morning, Galactic Standard Time. Admiral Kethver was reviewing daily reports when his command center suddenly filled with emergency alarms. His communications officer looked up from his station with confusion and growing alarm. "Sir, we're receiving distress calls from installations across 17 sectors," the officer reported, his voice rising with each word. "Multiple facilities are reporting equipment failures and human attacks." The alien admiral stared at his tactical display in disbelief. Red warning indicators were appearing faster than his staff could process them. Human forces were attacking simultaneously on dozens of worlds, emerging from locations that were supposed to be empty ruins and abandoned settlements on the surface of Kepler Prime. Captain Steve Murphy's underground forces erupted from beneath the main Zephyrian command post like a volcano of human determination. His fighters emerged from hidden tunnels and maintenance shafts that the aliens never knew existed. The Zephyrian guards found themselves surrounded by enemies who seemed to know every corridor and doorway in their own facility. "Team Alpha, secure their communications center," Murphy commanded as his forces spread through the complex. "Team Beta, take control of the power systems. Remember, we want prisoners, not casualties." The aliens stumbled through their own base as their life support systems began failing around them. Dr. Roy Adams' biological agents were working perfectly, causing computer malfunctions and air filtration problems without harming the alien personnel. The Zephyrians found themselves fighting an enemy while struggling to breathe their own recycled air. In space above the planet, Captain Tony Mitchell's Retribution led the assault on the Zephyrian orbital defense platforms. The sleek human vessel moved with deadly precision, its new weapons carving through alien shields like they were made of tissue paper. Mitchell watched with satisfaction as his plasma cannons disabled enemy installations with surgical accuracy. "Target the communication arrays first," Mitchell ordered his weapons officer. I want them blind and deaf before we engage their main fleet. The Zephyrian defenders tried to return fire, but their weapons passed harmlessly through the electromagnetic field surrounding the human ships. Dr. Phillips' defensive systems were working exactly as designed, disrupting alien targeting systems while protecting human vessels from damage. Admiral Kethver watched in horror as his fleet's weapons proved useless against the attacking humans. The ships he was fighting looked nothing like the vessels that had fled in panic 6 months earlier. These were predators built for one purpose: hunting and destroying Zephyrian forces with terrifying efficiency. How is this possible? The alien admiral demanded. Our intelligence report said the humans were broken and scattered. Where did these ships come from? His tactical officer studied the sensor readings with growing fear. Sir, these vessels are using technology we've never seen before. Their weapons penetrate our shields, their armor resists our energy beams, and their defensive systems are blocking our targeting computers. Captain Jake Morrison's Defiant emerged from behind an asteroid field, leading a squadron of ships that were supposed to be damaged refugees. The vessel that had spent months pretending to be crippled now moved with the grace of a hunting cat, its upgraded systems performing flawlessly under combat conditions. All ships, this is Morrison, the captain announced on the human battle. Frequency. Execute attack pattern Delta. Let's show these aliens what humanity is really capable of. The 30 ships under Morrison's command had been carefully positioned throughout the star system, waiting for this moment. Each vessel carried weapons and equipment that represented the best of human engineering combined with captured alien technology. The Zephyrians found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Johnson coordinated ground operations from her hidden command center, watching as resistance cells across the galaxy struck with perfect timing. Her communications network allowed her to monitor simultaneous attacks on 200 Zephyrian installations, all proceeding according to the master plan developed by General Wells. Sergeant Turner, report your status, Johnson requested through her encrypted communicator. Nick. Turner's voice came through clearly despite the sounds of battle in the background. All objectives secured, Colonel. The civilian fighters performed beyond expectations. The aliens never saw us coming. The psychological impact was devastating for the Zephyrian forces. Humans they had dismissed as broken survivors were fighting with skill and coordination that seemed impossible. The resistance. Fighters knew every weakness in alien defenses, every patrol schedule, every emergency procedure. They moved through Zephyrian facilities like they owned them. Paul Roberts had done his job perfectly. His months of surveillance work had provided human forces with complete intelligence about enemy operations. The aliens were fighting an enemy that knew their positions, their capabilities, and their plans better than they knew themselves. Dr. Nancy Green's linguistic analysis proved its worth as human commanders intercepted and decoded Zephyrian communications in real time. The aliens' desperate calls for reinforcements and tactical updates were being read by their enemies, almost before their own forces received them. Admiral, we're intercepting enemy communications, reported Ben Casey from his position aboard the Defiant. They're requesting immediate reinforcements from sectors 12 through 18. Their commanders are in complete panic. Admiral Kethver tried to coordinate his scattered forces, but every order he gave seemed to be anticipated by the human attackers. His ships moved to defensive positions only to find human forces waiting for them. His ground troops rushed to secure important facilities only to discover that humans had already captured them. The most shocking revelation came when the alien admiral realized that human forces had been inside his decision-making process all along. Every strategic meeting, every tactical briefing, every operational order had somehow been monitored by the enemy. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were fighting with complete knowledge of Zephyrian plans and capabilities. Captain Mitchell's Retribution closed in on the alien command ship, its weapon systems locked onto critical targets. The Zephyrian vessel tried to retreat, but the human ship was faster, more maneuverable, and equipped with technology that made escape impossible. This is Captain Mitchell to Admiral Kethver. the human commander announced on an open frequency. Your fleet is surrounded and your ground forces are defeated. Surrender now and your personnel will be treated according to galactic law. The alien admiral stared at his tactical displays in complete disbelief. His mighty fleet was being systematically dismantled by enemies who were supposed to be refugees and survivors. The humans had not just survived the invasion, they had used it to become something far more dangerous than anything the Zephyrians had ever faced. Dr. Phillips' biological agents completed their work as Zephyrian equipment failed throughout the occupied zone. Life support systems, communication networks, and computer terminals all shut down simultaneously, leaving alien forces helpless and confused. The compounds had been introduced months earlier during routine maintenance work, waiting for the signal to activate. General Wells watched the battle reports from her command center with quiet satisfaction. Her screen showed successful operations on every front, with human forces achieving their objectives ahead of schedule. The species that was supposed to be shattered had instead become the foundation for the most successful military operation in galactic history. General, all primary objectives have been secured, reported Colonel Rachel Kim. Zephyrian forces are requesting terms for surrender across 17 sectors. The revelation was complete. Humanity had not been broken by the invasion. They had used it as an opportunity to become stronger, smarter, and more united than ever before. The aliens who thought they had conquered a defeated species had instead awakened something that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. Admiral Kethver finally understood the truth. The humans had never been defeated. They had simply been waiting for the perfect moment to show the galaxy what they were truly capable of achieving. The silence that followed the battle was more shocking than the explosions that had preceded it. Admiral Kethver sat in his damaged command chair, staring at displays that showed the complete collapse of Zephyrian forces across 50 star systems. His mighty invasion fleet was either captured, destroyed, or retreating in panic. The species he had believed was broken had just delivered the most devastating military defeat in Zephyrian history. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiant as his crew secured the alien command vessel. The ship that had spent months pretending to be a crippled refugee transport was now accepting the surrender of the most powerful military force in the known galaxy. The irony was not lost on any of the human crew members who had performed their roles so perfectly. Admiral Kethver, this is Captain Morrison, he announced through the communication link. Your remaining forces have agreed to immediate ceasefire. We expect your formal surrender within the hour. The alien admiral looked older than his years as he realized the full scope of his defeat. Everything his intelligence services had told him about human capabilities was wrong. Everything his commanders had reported about the occupation was false. The humans had played a game so sophisticated that the Zephyrians never even realized they were being manipulated. General Patricia Wells emerged from her hidden command center for the first time in months, walking through the tunnels that Captain Steve Murphy had carved beneath Chicago. She moved past underground farms, hidden factories, and communication centers that had made the resistance possible. The network of tunnels and chambers would become a permanent part of human civilization, a reminder that they could never again be conquered by surface attacks alone. Wells reached the surface and stepped into the rebuilt halls of Earth Defense Headquarters. Her staff had prepared for this moment, setting up communication equipment that would broadcast her message to every corner of the galaxy. What she was about to say would change the relationships between species throughout known space. People of the galaxy, Wells began, her voice carried by transmitters that reached across hundreds of star systems. 6 months ago, the Zephyrian Collective believed they had crushed the human spirit. They thought we were a broken species, scattered and defeated. Today, they learned the truth about humanity. Captain Tony Mitchell guided his ship, the Retribution, through the orbital shipyards where the new human fleet had been constructed. The massive facilities were no longer hidden, their cloaking systems powered down to reveal the true scope of human engineering capabilities. Dozens of vessels floated in various stages of completion, each one representing advances in technology that would have seemed impossible before the war. "Captain, we're receiving construction requests from colonies throughout human space," reported his communications officer. "Everyone wants ships built to these new specifications." Mitchell smiled as he looked at the blueprints that master engineer Carl Davis had developed. The ships combined the best of human innovation with captured alien technology, creating vessels that were faster, stronger, and more capable than anything that had existed before the invasion. The Zephyrians had unknowingly provided the materials for their own defeat. Dr. Karen Phillips and Dr. Roy Adams stood in their laboratory, now expanded into a full research complex that would benefit species throughout the galaxy. Their work during the Resistance had led to medical advances that could treat diseases affecting multiple alien races. The biological agents they had used against Zephyrian equipment had taught them new ways to interact with foreign technology and biology. "Roy, the applications for our research go far beyond military uses," Phillips explained as she reviewed their data. "We can help other species improve their technology, solve medical problems, and understand biological processes they never imagined." Adams nodded as he studied the reports from their recent experiments. "The Zephyrians forced us to become better scientists, better engineers, and better strategists. We should thank them for making us stronger than we ever thought possible." Lieutenant Colonel Amy Johnson walked through the streets of New Geneva Colony, rebuilt and more prosperous than it had been before the invasion. The underground networks that had hidden the Resistance were now being converted into expanded living spaces, emergency shelters, and community centers. The colony was not just restored, it was improved in ways that would benefit future generations. Sergeant Nick Turner watched as former Resistance fighters transitioned into roles as teachers, engineers, and civic leaders. The civilians who had learned military skills during the occupation were now using those abilities to build stronger communities. The crisis had revealed capabilities that humans never knew they possessed. "Colonel, the integration is proceeding ahead of schedule," Turner reported. "People who thought they were just trying to survive have discovered they can accomplish things they never imagined." The psychological transformation was as important as the technological advances. Humans who had seemed broken and defeated had learned they could adapt, innovate, and overcome challenges that appeared impossible. The species that was supposed to be shattered had instead discovered new levels of unity and determination. Paul Roberts supervised the dismantling of Zephyrian surveillance systems throughout the formerly occupied territories. The alien monitoring equipment was being studied and reverse-engineered, providing insights into detection and communication technologies that would benefit human science for decades. The tools of oppression were becoming instruments of discovery. Dr. Nancy Green worked with alien linguistics experts to establish new communication protocols between species. Her analysis of Zephyrian language patterns had revealed universal principles that could help different races understand each other better. The war had taught humanity about cooperation in ways that peace had never achieved. Captain Steve Murphy stood at the entrance to the underground city beneath New York, greeting visitors from other worlds who had come to study human engineering techniques. The tunnels and chambers that had hidden the Resistance were now marvels of architecture that inspired scientists from across the galaxy. "The network will never be used for war again," Murphy explained to a group of alien engineers. "But it will always be here, proving that humans can build anything they need to survive and thrive." Admiral Kethver was escorted to the peace negotiations by Captain Morrison himself. The alien commander had requested this meeting, hoping to understand how his superior forces had been so completely outmaneuvered. The answer, Morrison explained, was not about technology or tactics, but about the human ability to turn apparent weakness into unexpected strength. "You made one critical error, Admiral," Morrison said as they walked toward the conference room. "You assumed that defeating us would be the end of the story. Instead, it was just the beginning. The peace treaty that emerged from these negotiations was unlike any agreement in galactic history. The Zephyrians would not just end their occupation, they would provide technological exchanges and cooperative research programs. The species that had been enemies would become partners in exploring the galaxy and improving life for all civilizations. General Wells concluded her address to the galaxy with words that would be remembered for generations. The Zephyrian Collective thought humanity was shattered. They learned instead that we were just getting started. Today begins a new era, not just for humans, but for every species that believes in cooperation, innovation, and the power of determination to overcome any challenge. The underground networks became the foundation for expanded human settlements throughout the galaxy. The hidden shipyards became centers of technological development. The resistance cells became the core of a new kind of military organization, focused on protection rather than conquest. Humanity had not just survived the invasion, they had used it to become something greater than they had ever been before. The galaxy would never again underestimate the species that had turned their darkest hour into their brightest dawn. More importantly, humans would never again underestimate themselves.